All right, I think we're going, and I'm just going to go ahead and click a button over here. Drive myself mildly insane with listening to some stuff because last week we had a little bit of a problem with the audio in this thing, and the meters seemed to indicate that stuff was happening, but didn't seem that stuff was happening. And oh, I'm hearing myself in my ears. I can't do that anymore. All right, hearing yourself in your ear with a tiny bit of latency is enough to stop you from being able to talk. It gets a little better when it's 30 seconds out, but nevertheless. Hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here. Welcome to tonight's live stream, the first live stream of June, and we're going to be doing some more work on the same stuff we were working on last week, the OverrideAudit package of mine. We've had a request for a feature from someone that uses the package, and we're going to be trying to see what we can come up with in that regard. And I will also go ahead and close this window. I was doing a little bit of chatting on the old IRC before we headed off into the live stream proper. Everything still seems to be going well. Maybe we'll just tweak that up a little bit. Maybe that will be a little bit better for us here. I wasn't quite getting what I wanted out of that. Let's see. Let's give that a little check and make sure. I'm really sensitive to that audience there. There we go. Okay, that sounds good. Cool. We are through the pre-flight check. I'm not taking any chances this week because while I was setting up earlier this evening, I was using OBS and trying to assign some key bindings to various things, and every time I clicked apply in the key binding dialog, OBS crashed. And eventually I gave up on that and fired up the live stream. I used the live control panel over here on this laptop to my right, and in the middle it just decided I was no longer streaming, even though OBS thought that I was, and I had to stop and restart stuff. So maybe it got a little angry that one of the tabs I have open on my other monitor is seeing if there are any newer versions of it. I'm currently running 25.0.1, which I hand compiled. That's the newest version at the time. Back when I compiled this, the website for OBS disavowed all knowledge that there was a version 25 for Linux at all. There was actually a newer version than this, but it didn't compile in a way that seemed to indicate that the code itself was broken, so I left well enough alone because it wasn't quite ready for prime time, I don't think. Something I should look into, but not, stream night. Anyway, I think that's probably enough banter here. It's probably time to jump into the stream proper, and we're going to try something a little bit different in this regard in the way that I'm doing this stuff. And there we have it. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I've been trying to do a little bit of different stuff here. Make sure that's all working good. So hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. Welcome to the live stream for June 2nd. 2020. We're going to be working on OverrideAudit. If you watched last week's stream live or in the preview, well, then you'll know that we were working on my OverrideAudit package, adding some new features to it at the request of a user, and I thought it was something that was a good idea to add. So now in this version, we have a new version of the override report. Now, of course, I could say override report. This is the standard version of this, and we'll get some stuff here. Various files that are overridden in various packages. One of the reasons this thing actually exists. We could do only expired, which currently will show nothing in this particular case. That's a little bit different from this one here. This is the one that gets automatically triggered when you upgrade packages or when you upgrade Sublime, and you can also invoke it yourself manually. This one tells you whether or not you have overrides in packages, and you have the package has been modified more recently than your override, which means the package was updated. Your override might be out of date. It's expired, if you will. And now we got that going on here. And the last one that we have is override report exclude unchanged, which is a regular override report. But we'll see when I do this, some of the files don't appear. And in particular, we see this notification at the top that says showing only modified overrides. Overrides with unchanged content may be omitted. And you might notice that down here in the C++ package, it only says unknown.txt. There's not the other override here. And if we swapped back to the other one, we can see in C++ there is actually this file here, and we can go ahead and diff that bad boy and see that there's no differences in it. So this feature was requested by a user, Michael B. Lyons, if I remember correctly. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he does a lot of work for the default packages that ship with Sublime, as many of the community do. And as a result, he has a lot of symlinked packages and packages in general for the default packages in his packages folder. And when he runs an override report, it tells him that there's a lot of files in there that are unchanged. And it's not quite a useful thing in that particular regard. So we now have the ability to have an override report exclude files that it thinks are different so that it doesn't have to go to the trouble of actually displaying anything, right? And the thing we're going to be working on tonight is adding the same functionality to the diff report. And there's a couple of these, not diff single override. That does basically what we just did a second ago. But we could say bulk diff a single package and choose a package that has overrides like C# and see a report like this. Or we could also do all packages. That'll give us a different report. And this does the same thing, but for all packages. So now for every single package I have where there is an override, we see some of this action going in here like so. So this allows you to see all of the things that are different at any given time for either for every package or just for specific packages. Hang on just a second here. I'm going to do that. I had a fan going to cool me down, and it has it has worked. But the other feature that Michael thought would be cool, and I tended to agree, was the ability to generate one of these reports, but without the thing that says no differences found in here for files that are the same. So again, if you were to bulk diff a single package with a lot of files in it or all packages, then you might end up seeing um, not that stuff you see. Instead of seeing a bunch of file not changed, file not changed, file not changed, you just have those deleted out of there. And I think we could do this in a very similar way to how we did the other thing last week. Now, one of the things I was mentioning at the end of the stream was kind of tricky to do this because it requires you to diff the whole package ahead of time to be able to know if any parts of it actually need to end up inside of the report. And actually, we're kind of doing that already, I think. I haven't looked at the code since then, but I think all of the reports work by generating their output into a buffer that's in memory and then flushing it out to the view when it's done. And if that's the case, we're already doing that. So that might make our lives a little better. What we do have to do is store the results for a package and only send them out if there are any. Because I think right now we might say output the part for default and then start outputting the contents of that package. So we might need to defer holding this part until the whole package is done, which might require a little bit of structuring in there. And again, this is one of those things where I kind of have a vague idea of how I'd like to go about doing it, but I didn't actually look a lot at the underlying code for how this works. So it'll be an adventure to see if we can pull this off in the couple of hours that we have for doing something like this. So it's maybe fire up some tea here. Don't tell anybody, but it's the evening and I'm drinking English breakfast tea. Uh, so what would be the best way to pull something like this off? Okay, we're not going to need that file. We might need something in the core. We're not working on override reports right now. So let's close all of the reports and that one. That's override report. We don't care. A change log. I've been excuse me, working on getting the change log updated. Incidentally, if you were watching last stream, we should be in this particular thing here. These are the commits that we added during that stream. A simple one I started off with, fixing the package so that it would work with package reloader, automatic package reloader, to make life a little bit better, because there was the way that automatic package reloader reloads things didn't work well with the way that I implemented some code. And we Also made sure that when reports refresh, the cursor ends up at the top. And lastly, the actual change that we made here, which is a lot of stuff. This is on GitHub if you wanted to take a look at it. But basically, during streams, I commit the things and then I just put simple one-line stubs in the commit message because you don't need to see me type out all of this stuff. Although, if you are a member of the Sublime Text Discord, you might have seen us talking today in the off-topic channel about various things, and one of them was work habits and how and why I am so prolific with comments and keeping track of code. So if you're not a member of the Discord, that could be an interesting thing as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now there's a couple of things going on here with this, and we could see up in here. There is, hello Ashwin, welcome to the stream. We have a few different things here. And I think all of them inherently go through the same command, but what they do is slightly different in each case based on arguments. I also had a thought that what we're going to do here is initially set up this diff command to have the same sort of argument as the override command did that we added, which tells it to exclude unchanged, I think is what I called it. We'll have to check and make sure. We'll take that as an argument. And then I think if everything works out, what we might want to do is default the value of that to none, have none mean the same as false, basically, because it's a falsy value, and then add a setting for exclude unchanged and have it set so that if the value of the parameter is none, then it pulls it from the setting rather than using the argument as true and false. That way, we could add the setting, or you could add the setting and be able to tweak that one way or the other. We'll see how that all works out, because I like the idea of basically that's sort of an end run on how we have multiple different entries for override report in here. Override, exclude unchanged, and only expired. I don't want to do the same thing for bulk diffing because then there'd be an explosion. There'd be like another two more of those. I'm already considering the idea that the entry for override report should actually maybe use a command, an input handler to choose what type of report you want to generate. And then a power user could do something like this and specify exact ones that they want or something. I'm not entirely sold on that one just yet, though. But I suppose the one thing we could do is, whoops, look at the main menu for this thing and actually verify that diff single is something that works with a single override or with a package. Right. Now, we can see here from the argument list on line 19 that diff single has an argument of bulk that is set to true if it should bulk diff a single package instead of a single file. And I think it probably also, if we looked, would take a package and an override as an argument. So let's see. It takes a packet. Oh, sorry. Find the run method. Pardon me. It takes a package, it takes an override, and it takes a bulk, right? And then it kicks things off from there. So it could do just a single override, or it could actually end up doing a package. And we can see here that if you said you wanted to bulk diff and you provided a package, then it would just call the diff report with a specific package. This is sort of a nice little entry point into this thing. And package list collection thread kicks things off with calling get overrides. Our callback is to run self-loaded. So that would be this bit up here. So if there isn't a package provided, then show the list. Otherwise, we verify if we have an override, diff the single override. Oh, and this diff override probably has some cleverness in it as well. Let's go ahead and try this. Process diff. Because there's a fair amount of sameness for this thing. So If package isn't none, then it needs to show package list, which would probably shoot back to package that picks package pick, which eventually calls the diff report command for the package that you provided. Okay. If package is none, that's how that one would go. In order to diff and override, you have to provide a package first, and then it'll get you to pick the override if there's one in there. Just because I didn't want this code to be super complicated with another argument. So pass none for both, and it'll ask you for a package and shoot it off. Provide a package, but not an override. It will allow you to choose. Um, the override, and if you choose a package and an override, you get both. Um, so has possible overrides. Otherwise, it'll say no overrides to diff. So this wrapper command here does most of the work of making sure that we're not going to potentially get invoked. We're going to have a little bit of weirdness here because this tries to stop you from diffing a package that it knows doesn't have any overrides in it. So if I tried to diff the Lisp package, if there's a Lisp syntax in here, I don't have any overrides in that. It should pop up with a dialog box to say there's no overrides in the package Lisp. But what we're actually doing is telling it that um, when it's calculating the diff, don't show anything that's the same, that hasn't been changed, that's the same. So in that case, we might end up with just a report that says nothing to diff, which is a slightly different experience than this, but that would really require caching a lot of stuff and doing a lot of work before something pops up. So it's something we could do. What is VMS? Ashwin is asking in the channel, what is VMS? It's actually an operating system that runs on not PC type architectures. I think our VMS systems are running on Itanium. I personally sort of consider it like mainframe light, but it's not really a mainframe per se, but uh, it's a sort of an operating system that's designed to be clustered, so you can have multiple systems running and one program when you're typing a thing on your local machine, you can tell it to run a program somewhere else. One of the features that VMS has, which is I think why uh, the people way back in the day chose it for what it is on say modern operating systems, there are the idea of files, and there can be a text file or a binary file, which really comes down to how you interpret the data when you're reading it from the disk. VMS has the idea of a record-based file system that's built in directly, so you can open a file and basically have records. So the system that the people wrote way back when uses it actually as a flat file database, and it's fairly efficient for what it is and entirely relies on the operating system to do the heavy lifting. The file system in VMS also has versioning built in by default, so every time you save a file you get a new version of it and you can go back to other ones, which is good for a lot of things in a business case as well. um, One of the problems that they have with that system is that thing I mentioned where not a lot of people entirely know how it works. So when it comes time to add new things to the database, they have to try to repurpose existing fields to put something else in, which can cause weird design compromises, like saying that stock tickers have to be a certain length because there's an unused field that's the right length. And it requires locking the file for writing, which means if the file is being updated, nobody can query it. And that's part of the reason why I mentioned I created what we refer to as the VMS gateway that allows people to access our data from within their system. And that's entirely so that we can process the data and people can access it while it's being processed. So, our system is, I think I mentioned in the past, running on like a ridiculous 32 core machine with 128 gigs of RAM with all of the stock data for North America up to the second stored in an AVL tree in memory for the fastest possible access and retrieval. And because we have so many threads in there, we can shoot in data from 8 or 9 suppliers simultaneously while people are querying data out, which is heretofore unknown in the world of VMS development. um, there was a mention of getting rid of VMS because the people that were responsible for running it, like the Open VMS Consortium or something, decided they didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore because no one had made hardware for it in like a decade, I heard. But somebody got the rights to it, so it's swinging back around. I think it's very popular in the business world. A lot of Fortran code and COBOL code probably runs on VMS if I had to guess. You can search up OpenVMS. I think there may or may not even be semi-free. No, I don't think there is. I think I was going to investigate. One of the things I was tasked with at one point was fixing data access problems they were having in their code. Because if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever run into the idea of a SIG bus, but sometimes when you access data from a pointer in C, if the memory address doesn't line up directly on a byte boundary in memory, in Intel processes, specifically x86 and x86-64, it takes multiple bus operations to fetch all of the data, but it still works. But the Itanium processor will slap you roundly in the face if you try to access data that's not aligned properly. So they were having problems with that, and they tasked me with fixing it because I'm the only C developer on the team. And I toyed briefly with the idea of setting myself up with a local copy of VMS so I wouldn't have to use their terrible VT440 terminal emulation, but I don't think that went very far. What's the best way to go? So this is definitely going to run command diff report, and okay, that's still diff report. Oh, I guess the other one, whoops. It's either going to diff report a package. That's diff reporting a package. Oh, the shorter version probably runs diff override instead, which does something slightly different. Let's go ahead and close that thing, by the way. So there's a key binding for that, isn't there? I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Doesn't say. I've been using this a little bit more, this idea in Sublime 4 of having multiple selection or multiple selected tabs at the same time so you can work a little bit nicer. Initially, it confused me because it looked like it was creating a split, but it wasn't really creating a split. Let's just double check if we went to this in the core that this is definitely generating. Yeah, okay. So this is the one for a single override is this one here. That's what I thought. Output to view is something in my library code that allows you to send output. So in this window, the view with this title, put this content, reuse and clear. Those are options that are global in OverrideAudit to say, do you want to reuse the existing window when you create a report or do you want to create a new one? And that plays into the idea of being able to swap between a file and its override with a single key press in this particular case. So we don't really care about that per se. It's funny that this is named diff single. And the other one is diff report. So diff single calls diff report. So everything we need to do should probably be in there. And probably not, well, yeah, we're going to end up looking at the thread, but let's go ahead and do that anyway. Yeah, that's what I thought, but it's probably in this file if I had to imagine the way that I laid this out. So this takes the name of a package and yeah, okay, that makes sense. If package is none, I imagine it does all packages instead. So let's see, the callback is Oh, nothing, because it's a bulk report thread. Right. So it calls underscore process up here. Get the package, create a package list. If package is not none, make sure that it's in the list. And then we either have a list of things that's just one package, or a list of every package with an override. This is one of those things. The diff packages thing here assumes you're providing it a list of things, and that way the special case for doing one or doing several is up here in these outer lines, and this inner code can be a little bit nicer. And then we just have to do something like fiddle around the title depending on whether or not there's one thing in the list or multiple things in the list. And there's also an indication here whether or not it was intended that there be only a single package, because it needs to be smart enough to know the difference between I said bulk diff C++ as the package and bulk diff all packages, but only C++ has overrides in it, so that it can create a little bit of a different thing here. And we can even see here, no packages with overrides found to diff is something that we're actually doing. So that is cool. Now, if we were to sweep over to here, one of the things we did in here was add a new argument, which is exclude unchanged. And I would imagine we added it to the thread. Let's go ahead and just do this, I suppose, and have a new thing in here. The thread took it as exclude unchanged and then passed it in as an argument. So this is the one we're fiddling with. We would probably do the same thing here. Oh, what order did I do that in? After force reuse. So we can say exclude unchanged equals false, like so. And then we would say exclude unchanged equals exclude unchanged. And we'll copy that and jump up to here in the process method, where we can do a little bit of this, I guess. And good news, it still reloads. So now we're pulling that in, and I guess we also need to pass it in here as well. Into diff packages is something that we will need to do. Now, clearly, diff packages is the thing that's actually doing the work in this particular case. Okay. And sometimes when I'm indenting things like that, I'm mildly curious how many PEP violations I have. I don't know if I ever mentioned, but I played briefly with the idea of using Flake 8, and then I got irritated with the number of things of mine that it didn't like, and I thought it made the code uglier and harder to read instead of the opposite. So that's the day I decided I wasn't entirely interested in being standards compliant if somebody wasn't giving me money to do it. So let's see what we got here. This is the number of lines of context that appear before and after all of the diff hunks that are being generated, which we use the difflib library for. So that's an argument that's provided. Binary patterns is a setting that actually exists in OverrideAudit, but if its value is none in your OverrideAudit settings, then it's plucked out of your normal preferences, and this is what's used to determine if a file is binary or not, which stops it from trying to diff anything, and it just shoots back a string that says this is binary. Ignore patterns is a list of packages from your settings that indicate what packages you don't want to include inside of diff reports, because there are some packages, and one of those is Sublimerge, not to be confused with Sublime Merge. It's all one word, which is a professional diff package, and it installs itself as an installed package and then extracts some of its content and creates a bunch of overrides and such that are suited for the current user inside of a package inside of the packages folder. So it will show up in all of the override reports as, being semi-useless in that case, because it's designed to work that way. So that's the reason why OverrideAudit has that particular option there, because specifically I'm a user of Sublimerge and I didn't want to see that. And if one package is doing it, there's probably others. And since you're not the one that created those and the package manages them, it's not necessary to actually see it in any reports. Then we gather the stuff we're going to do. Result is going to store the result of the diff. We have a title, a description, a report type, which is used in the setting so that context commands can tell if this view is a report of some sort, of an override report, and if so, what kind of report it is. And these have colons at the start for all of the special reports, because a bulk diff for a single package, as we can see here, is just the name of the package instead, which allows the context commands to be able to determine if a diff report is a diff report for all packages or for only one, so that it can operate slightly differently if it needs to. And that prefix is chosen because colons aren't valid in Windows C file or Windows file names, because they're used to specify drive separators. And as a result, packages can't have that name either. That's something that package control semi-enforces. The documentation for package control mentions various things that you shouldn't use in file names for packages, because one operating system or another will get angry about it, like less than and greater than signs, because those are used for pipes and things of that nature. Although interestingly, star is not allowed as a file name character on Windows, but it is allowed on Linux, and for a while there was a package that had a star in its name. And someone raised an issue in OverrideAudit about it not displaying things properly. And then we realized that, hey, it shouldn't even be doing that. And then the author of the package changed the name and life was good. So here we have some simple code. If there is... I sometimes feel linting tools get in my way. I know they're meant to enforce a consistent code style, but yeah, if I use a lint tool, I use it after the fact, if you will. One of the things that irritates me about the TypeScript package, and I have to leave it on, is it does auto linting while you're writing code and auto, error checking and stuff. The error checking things are okay. I mean, it's nice to know that you typed a symbol name incorrectly sooner rather than later, I guess. But the linting seriously gets on my nerves, particularly because of the weird code style that they've designed. So yeah, and also, that's a case of at work, I'm forced to use a particular code style as convention so that all the teams have the same stuff, which makes sense to me. So I will do it even though I don't like it. But for my own code, I want it to be readable to me and not, readable to some guy that's probably never going to look at it anyway. But I feel you on that one. And such as it is, it's sort of weird to enforce a style guideline on people when, style really is in the eye of the beholder. So let's see what we got here. If there's a single package, then the title has the name added. We throw it into the description. And so instead of saying, the actual description was a bulk diff report for overrides in, would either be all packages or the name of the package. As appropriate, and we append in the generation time. Now, I think we did this over here. We want to throw this into here as well before that part is injected in. Yeah, we can leave that for what it is right now, because I personally think it's a good idea in all reports. I think I mentioned this last week. If these things are supposed to be giving you a hint on things that could potentially be a problem, then you don't want the fact that you chose the wrong command from the command palette or you passed a certain argument to a command to get in the way of you mistakenly thinking that everything is clean and good when in fact there are still overrides present and it just so happens they're not being changed right now. I think that's a small price to pay, having a couple of lines up at the top, although I don't know offhand if the syntax actually supports that, which is unfortunate in the extreme. Maybe we should go ahead and swap this value to be true initially, right? Let's see. Oh, right. I suppose I should probably do that first and then try it and see. Yeah, that's what I thought. The syntax doesn't support it. That would probably need to be added as well. Let's see. What's the other one? Over syntax. Copy a little bit of that and then say diff report syntax. Diff syntax. I don't think. Yeah, this is the wrong one. Oh, actually, yeah, this maybe got its own stuff in it. Check status and that. Rough, man. Package report, override report, diff. Right. Oh, I guess because I'm using the built-in diff syntax for single diff overrides. Okay. Or single override diffs, I should say. That should be enough to get that to work because nothing in this report can start in column 1 unless we're the one that put it there. So there we go. While I'm remembering, that's the override report. And that's the diff. I think what we need to do, oh, I probably shouldn't have did that. Hang on, let's open that one again. Syntax test for override report. Throw a little bit of this in, and oops, don't do that. Syntax test for diff. So let's see. I think we want that to be set to automatic. Cool. Our syntax is not broken by doing that. That's what we like to see. And we have a nice little thing there. And I guess the real thing is, should that be first? Or should it be, how do we do it over here? Over here, it's, yeah, there's no title for these ones. So I guess it's easy enough to flip that around the other way if we were so desirous of such a change. We need to just stick it up here like this first, I imagine. Like so. And then if I refresh this, yeah, that's probably better. I guess one other thing that we did here was this. That's in the set content, which is down here. So we'll throw that in as well. Because I believe our refresh command, whoops, I did not mean to do that. Refresh report looks to see if there's an exclude unchanged, and if there is, and it's set to true, then it adds it as an argument to the command so that automatically this report will refresh the same way that it was originally created once we fix it so that it's doing it only when you call it with that argument and not just all the time like it is right now. So we're going good on that. And okay. Now, okay. We've got the generation time in. Result, append the decorated package name, and report diff for everything. So I think And then lastly, it calls this. So what the code is doing right now is looping over the name of every package in its list of things, get the package info, which is a class that wraps all the information about a class. If we were given binary patterns, tell that package info about it because the actual diff is inside of that the thing that actually does the diff of the override and its underlying file is inside of the package info class because it encapsulates being able to access the underlying file from inside of the zip file. And so after we do that, we append the package name, and then we append in the actual diff content. And package's name equals this, which is providing the information required to do this. All the information that appears in these pop-ups, like the name of the package, the version of it, whether it how many overrides it has, the different places it's installed, if it has any dependencies, all that stuff is information that you get by introspecting all of the packages to be able to find that information. And it doesn't seem like a good idea that when you hover this, it spawns a thread to be able to scan to find information about this package. So we actually inline that into the actual settings, and we'll see it gets set right here. The reports keep track of what packages are contained inside of them and the meta information, which is detailed, so we get more information than we might otherwise. In this case, it's getting detailed information because it has detailed information. In order to generate an override report or a diff report, it has to find whether there's a Sublime package file and unpacked files, and then it has to gather the list of all of the unpacked files and compare that to the inside of the Sublime package file to see what may or may not actually be an override and what ends up being an unknown file, which is a file that exists in the package folder but not in the package. That's a lot of stuff that has to happen to be able to get information like there are 3 overrides and one of them is expired. If you do the package report, it doesn't do a deep dive into the contents. It just determines the names of all of the packages and whether they exist as Sublime package files in the installed packages folder, in the shipped packages folder, and whether there's a folder for packages. And in that case, the information you get isn't detailed at all. It can tell you things like there might be overrides, but I don't know because I didn't check. And it can know that because if in order for there to be overrides, it has to exist as more than one of shipped, installed, and unpacked. So I think that if we said something like, I guess we would do it in here. We would say package result equals a list like this. Okay, and I'm assuming there's, oops, not more than one of those, right? So if everywhere we saw result like this, which is just those 2 places, we stuck that in instead, I think we'd find that if we do this, we end up with not a lot of stuff in here because it's not actually going anywhere. But we could, now if we said result dot append package result, I think that's the way to do that. Then those would all come back. No, huh? No. How do you add all items from one array to another array? This seems like something I have done in the misty depths of, well, I'm live right now. Python, add all items from one list to another. I bet you there's like an add method or something. Extend. Okay, well, we'll give that a try. What to do? Whoops. We don't need spell checking in here. Right on. Do this. Our report is back. Cool. Okay, so now we need this to say count equals this. And then if count do that. Now we're going to find perform diff, which is right here. And is there anywhere where it can return out of here? No. So we're going to say, let's say return 0. So if I was to return 0 here, that reloads. And when I do this, we end up with an empty report again. But if I returned 1 here, like this, and reload that, then this all works. So what we need is for this method to keep a count of the number of things that it diffed that were actually different, right? And we're going to have to restructure this a little bit too. We're going to have to say changes equals 0, and then we come down to line 148 and say return changes like so. But right now, what this is doing is outputting the whether this is the name of the file, but maybe annotated to be expired, or maybe annotated to be unknown, or maybe annotated to be this. So what we first have to do is calculate the diff like this. If diff is none, we got an issue. Okay. How do we want to necessarily pull this off? We gotta do the diff first. Let's double check this code. So if it's an unknown overrides, then we can just generate our own fake diff result that says this doesn't exist. You can't diff this thing, which I think we still want to appear in this report because it's technically different. It went from not being a file that exists to being a file that exists, right? Otherwise, it uses override diff in there to get the diff. If it's none, the content of the diff is screw you, this file is broken. Oh, look, there's a call to extend right here. Otherwise, it sets stuff up. So let's say we take all of this and we bring it down here like this. I think that should work the same way. For our purposes here, we'll set that to 1 right now. So we reload that, it works. If we came over to the report and reloaded it, we end up with exactly the same thing we already had, which is cool. And if we change that back to 0, that won't be the case. So first we need to do that, and then this. If it's none, now here's an interesting question. If there's a problem diffing, I guess you want to know about it because you can't tell if it's not the same or not, right? So here we're going to say the prefix is, here's where we're testing if it's empty or not, and we're just getting content. So let's say if the diff is none, then changes plus equals 1. And here, no, let's do it a different way. Let's say, let's try it this way first. If diff is not none and not diff dot is empty and oh, I didn't pass it in here. Exclude unchanged. Let's fix that while I'm remembering it. The argument that we got was exclude unchanged. Context, bloop, bloop, bloop. We'll add it to the end. And since we're going to have another one, we'll do this. Make that part a little bit nicer. So perform diff is going to have one extra argument here, like so. It should still reload. Cool. And okay, so get the diff result. If it's none, that's the content. If the diff isn't none and the diff is empty and the diff is not empty, no, that won't work. That won't work because we still want this to happen even if diff is none. So that can't be part of it. How about if we did it this way? What if we said changes plus equals 1, and then here we can say if diff dot is empty and exclude unchanged, changes minus equals 1. That seems like it might be nice. Actually, I guess we need to be a little smarter about this, don't we? Crap. I was thinking too hard about one part to forget about the other part, that we still only want this bottom part to append things if it's actually, okay, so let's take that out for now. Let's say excluded equals false. Let's say that. By default, we're not going to exclude. And then we can say if exclude unchanged and diff dot is empty, excluded equals true, like so. And then we can say if not excluded, do this. And we can say changes plus equals 1. Did I do that in the wrong place? If there's not an override list and there's not unknown overrides, then stick in other things. Right, because none of this will happen if there's no file, no packages to actually diff. In which case, it can say something simple like this. Should it still show up in a report? It's not really what we're fiddling with here, so let's give it a try. So right now, the only thing that is unchanged in here is this C++ single file build. And everything else should stay in here. If I refreshed this, does that one go away? Yes, it does. So let's, you should probably, for the time being, log something in there. Let's say log excluded from report, and I think that goes like this. File, reload, excluded from report, C++ single file, that's Sublime. That's only happened for one thing. Now, that's more or less the whole change, which is actually not too shabby. Yeah. So now it comes down to this stuff. If there's not an override list and there's not unknown overrides, and it's not possible, it is possible for there to be overrides, then say that. Now these are error conditions that happen when you invoke this command with very specific arguments. So if I was to say window dot, oops, whoa, that's wrong. Window dot run command, say we ran OverrideAudit diff report, and the arguments we provided was package and, whoops, like so. We end up with, ooh, that's interesting. That shouldn't happen. Let's try that with something different. Well, here, let's actually look at a package report. What's an example of something in here? C#. So if we used the package, let's fix that bug too when we're at it here. C#. It really seems like it should have worked. Why is it angry? Because there's no package files. That's weird because this totally used to work. I wonder. In perform diff on line 115. So specifically this. Unpacked I broke it with unknown overrides. Oh. Well, that's a swango and a half, isn't it? Okay. Let's see what happens if we went into the packages folder and removed unknown.txt. If we refresh this, it should provide some sort of cooler output for that, I suppose, for a single package, right? Bulk diff for overrides in C++. This comes back to up here. Diff packages does all the work. I don't like that per se. I guess that's where I was going to add something, wasn't it? Let's see. For name in names, perform diff. We might need our own diff count. Package count is 0. Whoa. This might also cause a problem when this is actually not enabled. No, that's not true because this thing will always add 1 unless it's excluded. So if it's not excluded, it goes up by 1, and it can only be excluded if exclude unchanged is set and it's an empty diff. So if it's an empty diff but exclude unchanged isn't set, then it won't exclude it from the report, and thus that will go up by 1, and this will return a thing back. So this allows us to say package count plus equals 1, like so. And then we need special action here, which would be something along the lines of excuse me. We won't see the item there. So we might say something like if package count equals 0, which should never be the case, generally speaking, because the code that comes in here makes sure if it's a package that doesn't exist, it kicks it out. Otherwise, it comes in. So if we said packages with overrides it should, append in no packages with overrides found to diff, which is different than this. If not package count, then we would say result.append. Shoot. Package contains only unmodified overrides. Dot format package equals names 0, let's say. Now let's do it the other way. Result.append no packages with modified resources were found. Let's see. What do we get out of that? Yeah, we want that to be slightly different here. If not, package count and exclude unchanged. We only want to do this if we're actually told to exclude things, because otherwise everything should work the same as it worked previously. Then we might say if length of names is equal to 1 and it's a single package, then we would result.append package bloop has no unmodified resources, and then we format that with names 0, else no packages with modified resources were found. Okay, I think that is what we want for this. Package C++ has no unmodified resources. Neat. But if we did it this way, then we end up with the information that we might have otherwise expected if we went back to the C++ folder. Let's say we touched sample.png just for the sake of argument. Then when we refresh this, we end up with that. Well, it doesn't exist in the underlying package file, but still the same action as we might have expected. So we get that result back. And if I delete that, package C++ has no unmodified resources. Neat and tidy. Let's see. If we did just a regular override report, which is that one, I like that one. We've got a lot of unknown files that we don't care about here. For example, this, I would imagine, yeah, I don't care about that at all. Yeah, maybe we'll leave that for the time being. I think, let's jump over here and see what we have. So first of all, we added that new match as a top level thing. Its positioning doesn't necessarily matter in the syntax. We added this test to make sure that it is caught the way we expect it to be. And all of our changes are in diff report. So starting from the bottom up, the command now takes an exclude unchanged argument that is set to true right now instead of false, which is passed into the thread. And that brings us up to the top where the process command pulls that argument out of its args and passes it to diff packages. Diff packages takes it. If we were told to exclude unchanged in diff packages, then it outputs the message to warn you that potentially there could be things that aren't being reported here. and then we keep a count of all the packages we diffed. And for each individual package, we do dog snoring under the desk. Perform the diff of the package, passing in the argument, get a count of the number of things in that package that were different. And if there are any, then we say that the package count goes up by 1 and add that result, which is the whole of that package, which includes the name of the package and all of the overrides into the thing. Here's a list of this. Now, technically, this, I guess, should be in there because only packages that are in the diff report actually end up in or need to have their information stored. So let's go ahead and bump that out like so. Not the end of the world if we determined that the C++ package doesn't have any stuff, but we added it as a setting anyway, but that's neither here nor there. And let's see if there are any things that are different, bump that up by 1, add those results, store the package. If there aren't any packages that generated output and we were told to exclude unchanged, then we output a message of either this package has no resources or no packages with modified resources were found. Now this can only happen when exclude unchanged is set, because if exclude unchanged wasn't set, then everything would do what it did before. So we don't have to worry about it not having output something. You would end up basically with the name of the package and no simple overrides or what have you. And lastly, in perform diff, we change the order of things. So instead of outputting first the name of the thing and then the diff, we first generate the actual diff, and then if we said we wanted to exclude unchanged changes and it's an empty diff, exclude it, count that as true, and only count this as a different file and output the header and the content if this wasn't excluded. So again, if the value of that was false, which it almost always would be, I would imagine, unless you do something specific like this, then this part up here won't trigger to set excluded to true. So excluded will be false, not excluded is true. It does this and everything works the way that it normally would. And then our method returns the number of changes. It's actually the number of changes seen and not the number of literal changes. So maybe we jump in there and change the name of that now that I'm thinking of it. Changes, reported. So it's very clear what that is actually doing. We're not reporting changes to overrides that otherwise don't exist. And that is more or less what we want for that. That part still works. Now, what we would actually do is what we did last time. So this should be false, like so. Now, if we did that, then we come back to, okay, let's close that one. Oh, I actually closed that. I did not mean to. Whoops. Okay. Bulk diff all packages. And now that's going to come back. So I think for our purposes, let's say create override. Oops. Come on, you. Create override in the default package for add line before. That, oh, it actually is still saying it down there. Oh, because I didn't reload the, okay. All right, well, that's an issue. Exclude unchanged is false, right? We passed it to the bulk report, diff report thread up here into the process. It's that, so its value should be false. It's passed in here. The report doesn't have, oh, it does have the warning on the top. Why does it have the warning at the top? Oh. Let's try that again, shall we? There we go. That magic we did to make sure that the refresh keeps the argument. we had created it with that set, so of course it was going to do that. Bulk diff report for overrides in 7 packages. And add line before, which weirdly isn't in the alphabetical order one might expect it to be. Okay, it's one extra line of context there, so that makes sense. And this file is unchanged. The C++ file says no difference is found. That says no difference is found. Right on. And let's see if we did something bulk diff of package default, we still see it there. If we did a bulk diff of package C++, we end up with that. So our diff command does what we want as of right now, but you need to pass it an argument, and we're not providing one right now. And you may remember that this calls OverrideAudit diff report if you try to diff single. That would be the path for if you did a diff of a single package, then that asks you for the name of the package first and then generates the report for you. So I think we also need that argument here as well. I would imagine that would be the way you want that to go. You want to say exclude unchanged and to diff single. Let's double check here. If you said override report, sorry, a single override is diff single, and a bulk diff of a single package is still diff single, and then all packages is diff report. So diff single might call this directly like this. So let's add this in here. If we're said to do it bulk, then we also want, probably want to fix this then. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. And a little of that, let's say. Is that? Okay, so as a test, if I said, we'll do it from the menu here, bulk diff, single package, and we chose C++, then we end up with that, no differences found. If we were to modify this menu for bulk diff single package and said this, now if we were to go to tools, override audit, bulk diff single package, and pick C++, that did not pass through the way pardon me, I need to close a tab on another desktop, on another laptop on a different operating system. Okay, I would have thought that that would have conveyed through. Exclude unchanged true in there. Oh, did I do this? Maybe I didn't do that. That might be the reason for that. So let's go ahead and see. Close that, close that. Got too many things going here. If we said that we wanted to diff a single package of C++, still no, huh? Oh, right. I know what I did there. This calls OverrideAudit diff report to cycle it through, and that's only if package is not none. So I'm gonna pull that out. This needs to get overrides is true, and oops, probably we only need one of those. And we want exclude unchanged equals exclude unchanged, like this. No, not like that. Here. Leave that for the time being. Because package list collection thread is not the thing we're doing. It's just a generic thread that collects the list of packages. And in this case, we tell it, while you're doing that, also tell us the overrides. Cool. So self-loaded needs to take an argument like yaw, like this. And you say if no package was provided, then it'll show you the package list. Show package list shows you packages with overrides, and in the quick panel uses package pick, and package pick executes the command. But if package is not none, then it's a package you provided in the list. It either says there is no such package in a dialog, or if you have not provided an override, it calls show override list. Otherwise, it does the diff, possibly telling you. And if it did show override list, then we'd see it doing a quick panel on file pick, and file pick just diffs an override directly. So the only path through here is going to be this one. Show package list also needs to take the argument of exclude unchanged, so that when we call package pick, it can call exclude unchanged, and that can get exclude unchanged, and then we can say this. Now that's kind of ugly, isn't it? Is that better? Maybe. Heaven help me. Okay. Now, if I did from the menu, well, that's double test. If I did from here, bulk diff of single package and chose C++, then we see that file that says no difference is found. If we did it from the tools menu, where we said diff single package with no package and pass one, then we end up with that. And that's because we manually overrode the menu to be able to do that. Okay. That's actually not too shabby as these things go. So I think let's go ahead and put that back to the way it was. So now if we did that again, diff single package, pick the package, we get the result that we always had before. I think that is doing pretty good. So let's stage. Let's see. Yes, our syntax item is cool. I'm gonna, just to make sure that it's the first rule, it doesn't really matter. Still works. Just because it seems nicer that way. That way, if these things wanted to have a rule like that, this one would still apply because the order of rules matters. So we stage that, stage our test to make sure that it works. And for diff single, what do we got in here? We have an argument to run, which we pass to there, and we shoot into the thing that gets called when the thread is loaded, which grabs it and passes it to show package list. Excuse me, which grabs it and shoots it out in package pick, and package pick takes it and passes it as an argument. So that argument is propagated all the way through. That is what we want to see there. And for the diff report, well, we just went through all of this stuff, grab the thing, there's a value. Output for that works as one might expect. So let's go ahead and stage that file too. And okay. Added in a new option to diff reports, package diff reports to allow for skipping the diff on overrides that are unchanged. To allow for skipping overrides that are unchanged from appearing in the report. Oh. Cool, and yeah, that's close enough. That's the short version. Cool. All right, so that's closed. That's closed. We come back over here, and we got a couple more files we need to modify in the changelog. Got to modify the documentation as well, but we'll worry about that later. Did I not save that file as much? Oh, I didn't have to modify that file, did I? Okay, so the thing here is make diff reports ignore unchanged files and commit, and I'll swing back and fix that up. Now the one thing we want to work on here is that does that, but if we did C# here, this shouldn't fail. And again, we saw that in diff report in line 122. Excuse me, in perform diff. So it's mad because package files is none. Package files comes from this. So we can go ahead and take a look at that, which specifically returns none if there are no unpacked files. So for our purposes here, or wherever it was that we were just a moment ago, because that didn't go back to the same place. Close override report. I think we're done with that one for now. That should be enough to solve that problem. Except that it doesn't actually display any output in that case. Let's see what we got. Let's move that over to there. So I can refresh this one and I can refresh that one. So we know that things are cool. We're going to not worry about the syntax anymore or anything in the core. I think that should have did this, right? Oh, I see. I see why it did that. Exactly what we would have thought, right? Crunk. Technically working as written, because if there isn't anything to diff, it doesn't actually include anything. The easiest fix for something like this is to just not return 0 in a case where that matters, right? For example, we could say changes reported is 0 if exclude ignored else 1 to make sure that this always has at least one thing in it. That's the most expedient fix. We could put this code down here. Where does the package name come from in this? It comes from, we call perform diff on a package by package basis, right? It's not an expired package. Hmm. Mm-mm. Okay. That would be here. Okay, so yeah, it would do what we wanted if it returned the right thing. There would be the package name, and then we could input the that bit. So if we said 0 if exclude unchanged else 1, whoops, as the expedient hack version of this, then this one would still do what we want, but this one would say that no overrides possible. So if we actually did it this way, that would do what we want. The other thing was this. Gets angry for a different reason. Which is pretty ugly. In packages.py in override diff in get package file contents. So that would be packages.py line 551. What error is this throwing? None. Really? Attribute error. How did I manage to make this be wrong? I mean, I can think of this is generating errors. Those are generating errors. Otherwise, yeah, I would imagine if I did something like if not self.package file, return none. This uses print instead of log, huh? Let's copy these 3 lines, let's say, up to here, just to see what this would actually do to the thing. Actually, this should just be excluded from the list of files that contain overrides. That's probably the underlying problem. But if we did that, yeah, that is not something we want. So let's go ahead and redact that out, because I think the actual issue, now that I'm thinking about it more closer, is that packages with overrides in the core because we closed the file. Take a list of packages from the given package list for which there is at least a single simple override and which is not in the list of packages. Okay. So the general issue is that this is returning package override files is returning a number even though it shouldn't. Let's see what we get here. from OverrideAudit.lib.packages import package info. No? Fine. Is it in source? No. OverrideAudit.lib.packages. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Okay. Okay. Package info for user, let's say. For the package named user, p dot over. I think we know what we'll see. Empty list. Oh, I guess this would be excluding it automatically, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's a bit of a red herring. I forgot what way I was calling it. All right. So that's cool. If let's see. There's a thing here in this. I guess it would just be package file, wouldn't it? So if not package.package file, then no Sublime package file. Okay. Find our command. Really? Oh, crap. Fine. Make me add extra code. Right on, right on. There, that solves that problem. Having a weird case of deja vu right now. This would be two separate things. Let's jump to there and say, is there a better way to do this? You want this to always appear, right? You want it to say there weren't any overrides, or, oh, actually, no, that's cool. This is the bit where it would have theoretically said something that apparently it can't say because it doesn't get this far. Because of that other thing that we just fiddled with. Because it tries to do diffs for files that don't have an underlying file. Whoa. Yeah, I guess that's okay. Okay, if there's not an override list, then there's not unknown overrides, then it would have said this. And it's definitely going to be one or the other. So we could say, if not, exclude unchanged changes. Reported plus equals 1. Probably a nice way to do that. Light shade of blue? I'll have to watch back and see. Has been giving me fits today. I don't know if you caught the early part. I discovered if you try to set key bindings in it, just crashes wholeheartedly and unreservedly. We'll have to see what is going wrong with that. Oh, that's. I actually don't want to fiddle with the setting there because that might cause it to blow. It hasn't dropped any frames though, so that's nice. Let's do this. Okay. Count missing. Otherwise, oh, if we're excluding. Right, did I do that backwards? 0 if exclude. Maybe I'm going to keep it the way that it was. Take that back. Yeah. Always assume one change. If we're not excluding things, excluding unchanged files, or the caller. Yeah. And we will stage that and amend it into the previous commit because that really should have been part of that, I think. And the last thing that we were fixing is just this. Oh, and that one down there. Which is going to be something like fixed diffing of packages with no unpacked files or no Sublime package file, and stage that as well and commit it up. Cool. Oh, shoot. Fix an issue where attempting to diff a package that has no Sublime package file or no unpacked files might cause an error. And now we want 22222. Fix manual diffing of reports of packages with no package file or unpacked files. That's too long. Fix a bug if manually diffing. Yeah. I'll probably swing by on those later and tweak them up a little bit. But, you know, I'm trying to sort of keep track of this stuff while I'm going instead of having to throw it at the end, though. Oh, I'm glad it's not happening very often, whatever it is. I'm going to try to upgrade my version of OBS this week. There's been a couple of point releases, at least one of which isn't Mac OS specific. They have sort of a weird scheme where if they fix a bug and they think it only affects one platform, they don't push it out to everybody. which seems weird. If I was supporting stuff, I'd want to have even parity for everything. Otherwise, everybody involved with support needs to know what the most recent version for any given platform is, which sounds like more work than anybody technically wants to go to, you know. Um, all right, so we got that and we got that. Now, technically, we now have the ability for diffs to do this, but we don't really have any way for it to be invoked, right? Unless you were to manually do it. So one thing we could say is, you know, a power user that wants something like this could add their own entry to the command palette. That doesn't necessarily seem like a nice thing. I mean, there's features that are meant more for power users that you sort of want to, or if you will, there's features that should only be used by people that know what's happening with their overrides, not something that you want to casually allow newer people to have because it'll mask problems and they won't be able to know. So it's more of a power user thing to be able to say, yeah, I don't care if there are overrides that exist if they're not different for the purposes of this. But there's also another to be a bad user experience and make people go in and manually add stuff to the command palette to be able to do that. So what could we do? I was thinking that we could have a setting that controls it instead of the argument. Uh, in which case, all that stuff we did to shoot that argument all through the call chain doesn't necessarily need to be there. Um, we could change the default to be none. None is a falsy value. So if the default argument for that in at the call point is none, then all of the code that currently is there should continue to work exactly the way that it does now. It would think that you had it set to false and not exclude things, so everything should still work. But inside of the inner place where the command actually gets executed, we could have it say if the value is none, then pull the value for the setting. In which case, the setting would allow you to control globally whether it was enabled or disabled, but as a power user, you could do it both ways. Oh, that's necessarily not a great idea either. Maybe it just got to sort of bite the bullet and add. Maybe. Uh, maybe have it as a setting for bulk diff of all packages, but not bulk diff of a single package. And bulk diff of all packages would do stuff, but for a single package, you want to know because you're focusing in on one particular package. Let's see. Open Sesame. I'm just going to go ahead and type in this window for a second here. Da, 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 bam. And that, and let's see. A specialized override report that only shows files that are different from the base, which we got, or a way to skip unmodified files in the bulk diff report. And I'd code full to level 2. Okay. It doesn't specifically say. What we say here, I have a lot of full package overrides for lots of ship packages, but most of those are unmodified. There are dozens of snippets. They all show up. When I do an audit, what I really care about are the files I've added. The default behavior works really well. Okay. I gave it a thumbs up because I like the idea and not because he said it rocked, by the way. So maybe we had an option for bulk diff all exclude unchanged. and then leave it as an operation to the user if they want to bulk diff a single package with that option? Could be a way to go. It's probably a good middle ground to begin with. So let's see. Let's go ahead and open up this. We added override report exclude unchanged. Okay, let's copy that and say bulk diff override, bulk diff all packages excluding unchanged. Let's change this to override report exclude unchanged. All packages excluding unchanged. Yeah, I think that's probably what we want that to be. And then we need some args, and we want that to be true. And then join those all back up. I wish it wouldn't do that. So now it should be in the menu. So I should be able to say up here in the menu, bulk diff all packages excluding unchanged, and we get that particular version of it. Or I could say tools override audit bulk diff all packages, and we get the normal one. And then we would need to do the same thing in the commands file as well. So let's see. Delete current override bulk diff all packages. Excluding unchanged. Oh. Yeah, I left it that way there too. Okay, so now we could also say, oops, bulk diff all packages excluding unchanged. Maybe I actually provide the argument to that one. That sounds like a plan, right? And I have been joining those up like so. All right. Now, excluding unchanged for bulk diff gives you that one. Now, we've chosen here to decide that those packages should be excluded entirely. The thought occurs that maybe it could appear in the report and then just say no unchanged files. But from the way the feature request was worded, I think that it might be irritating to know that that's the case. Only see what you've changed, not see what you didn't. I think that's the way I was pondering it myself. Let's say I got like stuff on a whiteboard back there for various things. That's good for that. I think what we might want to do is what if we did this and fixed various issues so that in the tools menu, they're sort of in a separate spot. Just so that it's more clear. Does that seem better? This, I don't know. One other thing that occurs as something that would be easy to add is the idea that when we generate these reports, we store a setting that is whether or not exclude unchanged was in there, so that when you hit the refresh key and it refreshes the report, it does it by invoking the correct command with the same arguments, so that if you generate one as excluded, it'll always be excluded and vice versa. And since this is a setting, it would be possible to create a specific kind of refresh command, if you will, that could take that setting, flip it around the other way, and reapply it, and then invoke the normal refresh command so that there would be a way to toggle a report between showing and not showing unchanged things at the expense of recalculating all of the diffs. That might be interesting too. I am not sure, but I think we're pretty close to the end of the stream, so I'm fairly happy with this. I don't think I necessarily like those changes. So let's take those back and we'll just revert it because it's important that... Oh, I went too far. One back. Thank you. Thank you. All packages excluding unchanged. Yeah. I think that's probably what we want. So what did we actually change? We just added commands to that. So this is actually something that should be down there, isn't it? So I guess we should probably say commit this file and that file. Commit it, move it down. And then squash these bad boys. Just that make that a little bit nicer, because it probably should have been a part of that. All right, well that's neat. We got that going. Now, what other features did we might actually want to work on in this? I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to think about that for the next stream. Might need to do a little bit more cleanup in this before we push a release out, do a little bit more testing. That'll probably happen behind the scenes. So the next stream might have some work on HyperHelp. I'm not entirely sure, but I think we are maybe gonna call it there, because I'm not really sure that there's really anything to get into right now that we can do in like 4 or 5 minutes time. So let's say that we're gonna call the stream here. That's actually been pretty productive. We managed to, with not a lot of work, realistically speaking, modify things. It's kind of nice that the design of the diff code, the way I wrote it, was written that way to allow you, because it made it so much easier to just say capture all the diffs for a single package and then just kick them out and not bother displaying them at all. And of course, if we wanted to still have them in the report, but just have items excluded and maybe just have a line underneath it that says X, like 3 overrides hidden or something like that, so that you'd still know that they're there, but not exactly what they are, that would be fairly easy to do as well. But I don't really see the utility in that, because you could already code fold things to hide away stuff that was displayed that way anyhow. So yeah, that is cool. I think the next stream, unless something comes up with this, if we need to tweak some things, I think that would possibly end up being the last of the override audit work for now. We got some things we'd like to work on in the help system as well. Potentially with the idea of stopping it from bootstrapping itself and instead maybe relying on package control and using package control to install that package if it doesn't exist, so code that uses the dependency can still get it and things will be a little bit easier for us to work with. But I think that is what we're going to do for now. So if you have been, thanks for watching. Remember, you can always leave comments and suggestions for live streams down in the comment section of any video on the channel. You can also join the stream live and ask any questions. It's also fun to watch live because you get to see me scratching my head. You can You can point out my problems to me in the chat, and also on the other channel I have, which is linked down in the description below. I do weekly Sublime Text tutorial videos, and the next one coming up is not plugin 101. It's a quick tips video on, I want to say, I can't remember. I recorded a few of them. Sidebar, possibly. Yeah, it's a new thing I'm trying. A rapid fire question answer for common things that people ask about the sidebar that could be used as a very quick introduction and then reference to other videos. We'll see what happens when that one comes out this week. And until that next video, thanks again for watching. Pardon me while I click over here to find the appropriate thing and say, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day.